This is by far one of the most insane stories I have read on the internet, and to be honest, you can kind of compare this to the very first murder of all times with Cain and Abel. Loving siblings that were kind of raised together turn on each other for drug money and then escalates to a deadly game of revenge that led to a cold-blooded murder. This is one of those events that if there isn't a movie or something already, I'm pretty sure there's going to be something soon. What it do, family? I am the Mysterious Black Bandit. Let me ask y'all something. What is one of those sacred rules that you and your siblings have that should never be broken? After watching this video, you'll see why I asked the question. Alright, before we get started, please hit that like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications so you don't miss out on any of these videos when I upload. Let's get to the story. It was the early hours of May 9th, 2014 in Baltimore, Maryland, when a truck driver headed down the alley on the 31st block of Wilkens Avenue spotted what looked like a body on the side of the road. He wasn't too sure, so he pulls over to get a closer look, but by the time he got about 10 to 12 feet away, he discovered the deceased bullet-ridden body of Ramon Wilder. Ramon had been set up and killed by not only someone he was close to, but his own flesh and blood, his brother Brandon Wilder. Now, before we get into how this all came about, let's go back to their childhood to see if we can unravel the twisted relationship and the rivalry that led to Ramon's untimely death. Now, Ramon and Brandon Wilder shared a father, and although they were brought up in separate households, they practically grew up together. Their father, Gordon Wilder, had 6 children with 4 different women. So, in hopes to keep them off the streets of Baltimore and keep them bonded, he would often secure them jobs at his worksite and auto shops. Juggling all these kids and different baby mothers, Gordon felt that he was a dedicated father. He was a hard-working father and tried to do whatever he could to keep them close. But even though he worked more with Brandon, Ramon, who was his firstborn, was a little closer to him than the rest. He would call and speak to Ramon just about every day, even if it was just to say hi, and he spoke very highly of him. He stated from a young age, Ramon was motivated to be successful and always kept some type of job. In the past, Ramon had obtained a commercial driver's license, worked a night job hauling trash, and had 2 children. Now, Brandon, on the other hand, Gordon couldn't recall if he had any goals or aspirations. Brandon was one of those people that always say they wanted better for themselves, but never did anything to make that happen, and he also had 4 children and was in and out of jail all the time. Now, Gordon claimed that he spent the same amount of time with all his children. But according to Brandon's mother, the reason why Brandon got in so much trouble was because his father wasn't around and in his life to teach him how to be a man. Now, just so you know, it wasn't just Brandon that was always in trouble. Ramon and Brandon had got caught up in the drug game, and Ramon had multiple drug dealing convictions. Now, as far as Gordon knew, he wasn't aware of his boys having any problem with each other, but he did hear word on the street that one of Brandon's close friends named Theodore Grice was putting some bad thoughts in his head about his brother Ramon. Although the two shared a father and had grown up together, their relationship over the years had started to sour. They both were in the dope game, but instead of them working together, they became rivals. Brandon was always complaining to his 34-year-old friend, Theodore Teddy Grice, about his brother taking money from him, and I'm not sure why, but Ramon would pursue women that Brandon had already been with. This crossed a line that Brandon could not forgive and would make him turn into a complete enemy of his brother. Brandon became so upset and jealous, he started telling people that he was going to rob and beat up his brother for not only that, but also taking his drug sales. And of course, that Negro Theodore was right there in his ear playing devil's advocate, stating Ramon is a bad brother, and if it was me in this situation, I would have been done something to him. So over the next few days, Brandon had enough of his brother, so him and Teddy came up with a plan to extort his big brother. And with Teddy adding fuel to Brandon's hatred, they plotted what would become a deadly trap. On Thursday, May 8th, 2014, Ramon surprised one of his female friends, Celeste Price, with a trip to the Atlantic City for her birthday. Just so y'all know, Celeste was one of those females Brandon knew and had been intimate with back in 2012. So while they were en route in the limousine, Ramon received a phone call from this girl named Labria Paige, which was the mother of Brandon's child. As they were talking, Raymond put her on speakerphone so Celeste could hear everything that was being said. During this conversation, Labria tells Raymond that she no longer wants to be with his brother and wanted him to meet up with her so they could have intercourse. Soon afterwards, they got off the phone, but for the remainder of the day, Raymond and her text back and forth while Celeste and him was out for her birthday. Meanwhile, back in Baltimore around noon on May 8th, Teddy goes and picks up his girlfriend, Brianna Diggs, then they head to a motel to meet up with Brandon and Labria. Once they got there, Brandon and Labria were fighting because he found out that his brother Raymond had been at his house one time while he was out of town. Now, I don't know if this man just loves chaos or if he was just trying to look out for Brandon, but while they were arguing, Teddy tells Brandon that Raymond and Labria had also had intercourse in front of his son. Sometime later, after they had calmed down, the four of them, including Brandon and Labria's child, left the motel and met up in a neighborhood in Southwest Baltimore City to get in Labria's van. As they were riding around, I'm assuming that Brandon was starting to back out of trying to rob and beat up his brother because Teddy started instigating again. He tells Brandon, "Don't forget about how your brother was disrespecting you and taking food out of your child's mouth." And throughout the whole time they was riding, he just kept repeating this. Now, do y'all remember the call that Raymond had got from Labria that day? Well, that was actually Brandon. He was the one that actually called and forced Labria to say those things. And after they had got off the phone, he was also the one sending these sexually explicit texts, just trying to lure him to meet Labria. Whatever he sent those text messages apparently got Raymond because originally he had planned to stay the night in Atlantic City, but Raymond and Celeste ended up returning to Baltimore, arriving home around 2 a.m. May 9th, 2014. Once they got there, Raymond tells his female friend that he was going to have the driver drop him off at his rental so he could go to his night job. Okay. Now, late on that night, Labria and Brandon dropped off Teddy and his girlfriend, and they drove to the spot where they told Raymond to meet her. Once they got there, Brandon instructed Labria that when Raymond arrived, she was to tell him to walk over to the vehicle so he could see his nephew. Brandon then exits the van and walks down the alley where no one could see him. Shortly afterwards, Raymond pulled up in his rental and Labria flashed her lights to get his attention. As he was walking to the van, out of nowhere, gunshots was let off and Raymond took off running down the street to try to get away. Scared half to death, Labria speeds down the road, but as she got to the end of the alley, Brandon, who was holding a gun, stopped her and told her to drop him off at Raymond's truck so they could take it to Teddy. Well, check this out. While Brandon was getting his stuff ready to get in Raymond's vehicle, they discovered that one of the bullets had struck the van close to where their child was seated. Now, I'm not sure if Labria actually had feelings for Raymond, but as they was headed to meet Teddy, she tried calling Raymond's phone to see if he was okay, but Brandon was the one that picked up the phone. Once they pulled up, Teddy immediately hopped out the car, hooping and hollering at Brandon because Brandon had actually called him from what he said was a dead man's phone. Now, after they sat there for a while and came up with a plan, they all drove back to the motel with Brandon driving Raymond's truck. As soon as they got there, Teddy hopped in the car with Brandon and they drove Raymond's truck to a nearby Red Roof Inn where they dumped the truck, but not before loading up any valuables they had found. Around 4 a.m. in the morning, Raymond's body was found by that truck driver, and it wasn't long before Brandon and his crew was caught. Investigators found Raymond's truck at that motel, and once they reviewed the surveillance footage, they saw that around 5:30 a.m. on May 9th, that vehicle had pulled up into a parking spot, and Brandon and Teddy got out of it. Eventually, Brandon and Teddy were arrested and brought in for questions, but how about when they arrived, Teddy had on the same hat he had on in the surveillance footage, and Brandon was wearing a shirt that belonged to his brother. Now, at the beginning of their trial, the prosecution came out very strong, basically calling this a cold, calculated murder. They described how Ramon Wilder was driven by jealousy and hatred because his brother was not only more successful, but often took women away from Brandon. On the other hand, the state felt that Theodore was the ringleader of the attack on Raymond because Brandon looked at him as a father figure and also trusted his opinion. To refute this, Teddy said that he planned on taking a stand in his own defense to testify how their relationship had fallen apart. Teddy stated that he doesn't know if he was a coward, but he allegedly told Brandon that he wasn't helping him take out his brother. Now, according to Teddy's lawyer, once Brandon found out that he was basically placing all the blame on him while Teddy was awaiting trial, he was stabbed over 24 times in jail. An attack, he says, was set up by Brandon to keep him from testifying. Now, this trial had two key witnesses to testify against Brandon and Terry, their own girlfriends. Labria, who had known Brandon since middle school and been in an intimate relationship with him off and on throughout the years, stated that Teddy never liked Raymond from the start. She described Teddy as being manipulative and said that Raymond would still be alive if it weren't for him. She said that the night before the murder, Teddy was in Brandon's ear the whole time, basically convincing him that anything that happened to his brother Raymond is well deserved. She also claimed that her involvement in the incident wasn't because she wanted to, but because she was forced. Brianna Diggs, the girlfriend of Teddy, testified that she was high most of the time during the events leading up to Raymond's death. According to her statement, when Brandon and Labria dropped them off at their vehicle, her and Teddy nodded off but was waken up by Brandon's frantic cough. Allegedly, she knew something bad had happened when she heard Teddy on the phone in a panic saying, "I hope you aren't calling me from a dead man's phone." Now, in the end, Labria pled guilty to felony murder and received a 20-year sentence in exchange for her testimony, and Brianna Diggs pled guilty in the robbery and only received a 2-year sentence. Brianna received a lesser sentence because she did not participate in planning the murder, but was merely with Grice at the time of the shooting. As for Teddy, the state insisted that he helped Brandon. They stated that he had a $1,000 a day drug habit and a long criminal history, so he should definitely be charged with murder. Teddy's defense attorney said that he only helped Brandon try to clean up the mess when the robbery became a murder. He continued and stated that Teddy's the person you call when you're in a bind, so he's only here for being an accessory. Although Teddy helped Brandon set up the robbery, allegedly he didn't know that it was going to turn into a murder. So with that being said, 37-year-old Theodore Teddy Grice was acquitted of participating in the murder, but was convicted of conspiracy and carjacking and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Ramon Wilder's death was part of a series of crimes police linked to Brandon Wilder and his friends. Just 3 days before the killing, Brandon held up and carjacked a pill dealer at a shopping center. Then 2 weeks before that, he deliberately ran over a man in a Lakewood neighborhood. With just those two incidents, Brandon should have been off the street a long time ago. In October 2016, 29-year-old Brandon Wilder was found guilty of fatally shooting his half-brother Ramon Wilder and was sentenced to life plus 30 years in prison without the possibility of parole. This is an all-around tragic event, and for them to be brothers who were allegedly raised up together makes it even worse. There are certain rules when it comes to brotherhood that you are not supposed to break, and I will admit that it's pretty messed up that a brother would try to talk to a female you have not only been with for years, but have a child with. I don't know what Raymond's motive was, and if I was Brandon, I would have definitely been pissed off too, but there isn't anything in this world that will make me jealous enough to kill my own sibling. And now that I'm thinking about it, what kind of female messes around with brothers? I don't know, but what do y'all think? Do y'all think Raymond was intentionally trying to provoke his brother Brandon? And if you were in Brandon's shoes, how would you have handled finding out that your brother was messing around with your baby mama? Y'all let me know down in the comments. All right, family, let me thank you guys so much for your support. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. And until next time, stay mysterious, my friend.